Contact report 807 translation English translation 807th contact Pentecost Monday, 6th June 2022, 3:41 p.m.
Hello, Bermunda. I least expected to see you today. But welcome and greetings.
Greetings also, but I cannot stay long. My coming here is mainly because I want to inform you of various things that are probably important for you to know about.
If you think it is important,
Yes, I think it is.
well, go ahead and shoot. What's so urgent to report?
First, I want to address what you asked Patar to find out a long time ago, what the truth actually is regarding the poison attack on the Russian Navalny. We were able to find out only 2 days ago. Consequently, it is to be said that the presentation of the poison came from within the man's ranks, and that
Otherwise I think he would have simply been shot if...
That is to be assumed, because that would have been more efficient and moreover. But that is not so important that we have to talk more about it, because there are important things to mention, namely the men Zelensky and the Americans with their working in the background, which for certain reasons you should not name openly this time are effectively playing with fire. Patar will tell you more about this when he comes to see you next Wednesday. We have tried to find out the exact reasons and backgrounds of the whole very unpleasant events in Ukraine, whereby we have also analyzed the main actors in detail and explored their true nature, which, unfortunately, has very discarded aspects in all of them. It took 3 months, but it is undoubtedly the case, according to our very precise findings, that none of the persons we analyzed ever made an effort to create true humanity within themselves. All of them are obsessed with power, and devoted to evil and crime as well as to all injustice, and thus also to killing as soon as something contrary to their desire arises and what they fundamentally want is not done. This is the case with the main actors on the Russian side as well as on the Ukrainian side, so the only difference is in the way of acting and the personal upsurge of feelings and emotions and so on, as well as the general behavior. In the whole of what is happening in Ukraine in terms of war, all the irresponsible states who are supplying weapons to this warmonger and war criminal Zelensky are cooperating in a totally non-thinking way. He is really the real war criminal in this war. And it is to him that the irresponsible leaders of many states are supplying weapons and are complicit in the war in Ukraine, which would never have started if this criminal had not wanted to betray Ukraine to the NATO organization and the European Union. Together with the Americans and their underhandedly responding to Zelensky's request, it resulted in the eventual war. The whole negotiation was deliberately dragged out by America because it was expected that Russia or Putin would lose patience and start the war that America and secretly wanted. This was because it fulfilled their ulterior motives, namely that this would make it easier for them to achieve world domination over time and through war, and to be able to quickly implement their plans in this regard. This, if they can severely damage, humiliate and force down Russia through war, which inevitably had to come because Putin did not want to wait, on which even certain persons in America made bets among themselves. Through the irresponsible arms deliveries to Zelensky, the war can now be continued and protracted and prolonged all the more, which is certainly in the interest of the Americans and their war economy, but also in the interest of the war criminal Zelensky, who is unthinkingly and consciencelessly sacrificing the Ukrainian military in order to satisfy his greed for power and lust and his urge to kill. Everything is done, on the one hand, according to her will and that of the equally conscienceless Ukrainian leader, this conscienceless male factor, who takes pleasure in war and killing and feels more than comfortable as the leader of what mischief he causes and the death of many human beings. On the other hand, in his stupidity he is nothing more than a figure placed in front of the whole thing by the Americans directing him, who strive to bring Russia under their control and thereby the world all the more easily under their domination. War is always very evil and, moreover, a crime against the respective human beings as a whole, so that not only those human beings come to harm or are killed, but also the living beings that occur in those areas in manifold ways are criminally affected, killed or even finally exterminated, because they inevitably become involved in the consequences of the acts of war.
I realize this myself, but the stupid and dumb of all the arms-supplying governments do not realize this either, nor do those from their populations who equally only see the Russians and Putin as the bad guys and do not realize what is really going on, and that the United States of America with NATO together with Zelensky are behind it all. War is always a crime, no matter who starts and leads it. So in the case of the war in Ukraine, it is also irrelevant whether Putin has lost patience, and the powerful in the United States of America and those who secretly influence them in the shadow government are playing their dirty game. War is war, and war involves the killing and murder of human beings as well as the destruction of many hard-won human achievements, the destruction of much of nature, as well as the killing and eventual extermination of natural life of all species and kinds. Either way, war is always a crime, and it does not matter who starts and wages it. So it is also on the side of the defenders in a war, because they do exactly the same as the attackers do, namely kill, murder, rape, and destroy. And the fact that the enemy and the defenders commit war crimes and massacre their own people in order to then blame the enemy is part of the daily routine, and is always the same dirty game, just as false reports are constantly spread in order to make the other party look bad and to praise themselves. But the fact that humanity is making life on Earth more and more impossible, and ultimately completely impossible through its criminal activities and constantly growing overpopulation, as well as with the wars, hatred, revenge, and retaliation, and the ever more modern technology, is something that the majority of humanity does not think about, because there are truly only a few individuals who seriously think about it responsibly. The Earthlings have already become so addicted to modern technology at a young age that they can no longer get along and exist without it, precisely exist into the future, because it can already no longer be said that they consciously live into the future, because this has not been done for a long time. The young human beings of today merely exist. In their delusion of being young and dynamic, they do not notice that their so-called dynamism will sooner or later lead to them pulling the rug out from under their own feet and falling into the abyss. This is precisely because their dynamism is nothing but an illusion that cannot be realized. It is already so far that many youths, adolescents, and young adult human beings have ideas in their heads and think that they no longer have to work as they did in the old days, but have to be lords and masters with their own companies and inventions, and so on, and be bosses themselves. Many are already trying to do this today in Switzerland at present, about 50,000 per year, only to fail miserably and plunge into debt, the end of which is crime, dissipation, or psychic misery, or suicide. Many of the young orientate themselves on the greats, who often make a lot of noise about themselves in the newspapers or on television: celebrities, actors, sportsmen and women, footballers, music makers, singers, presenters, and many others. Many of these celebrities pair up and marry only to break up again shortly afterwards, with all the hassle of a court battle, with sums of money amounting to tens and possibly hundreds of millions in damages or repentance money and severance pay being brought into the dirty game. Others simply fall into prostitution for the sake of mammon, young women as well as men, because it is easier for them to make money this way than to earn what is needed to live through honest work. Many young people are of the stupid belief that they have to do as the celebrities do, so they try and fail miserably to become psychological ruins and a burden to their fellow human beings, to end up in the loony bin or 180 centimeters under the earth, because they die miserably as unfit to live or kill themselves. However, talking about this and also about the war and so on is really useless, because the stupidity, partisanship and lack of understanding cannot simply be shaken out of the skulls of those in power and the people crying with them, who are incapable of thinking and reasoning. In my opinion, we should not talk about this anymore, because all that is said is of no use, because the stupid and the foolish, and that is to say, those who cannot think for themselves, do not allow themselves to be taught, and continue to be biased and so stupid that they only realize this when it is already
It's too late to contain the fire that is threatening to break out, as I said. But you are not to mention that, either privately or publicly, because you know, and that is probably I am still to mention that explicitly, as Peter instructed me, because. And on that.
Yes, I know that, which also prompts me to say that we shouldn't talk about it any further. At the end of the day, it's still said that I'm biased towards Russia and Putin, because I'm just saying what the US is really doing with its secret and Zelensky and continuing to plot. It will probably be best if we don't talk openly about everything in future, then hopefully I won't be telephoned or written to anymore. In general, it is strange that I am being approached because I have nothing to do with all the fuss that is going on in Ukraine. In any case, it is unpleasant for me to have been approached because I neither want to get involved in the banter nor do I engage in any political activities. This is also not the case when I say for this and that what corresponds to reality and its truth and must be said. But I think that we should really stop talking about what America really wants, what is behind everything, what is really going on with Zelensky and certainly not that. The United States of America are ultimately running into their own knife, and I have nothing to do with that, and I don't want to have anything to do with it later. That alone and various other things like make me not want to talk openly about it anymore. What is to come is not my beer, but that of those who are stupid enough to go along with Zelensky's desire, which is controlled by the US anyway.
I understand that, and I am endeavoring to see that it is arranged that none of us raises this issue again in such a way that it should be listed in the reports of the talks.
That at least.
That shall be so. That is what I will endeavor to do.
Thank you. The whole thing is really repugnant to me, and I don't need the fuss. Let those who are stupid enough not to be able to see the truth and make things worse and worse deal with it. Sanity and reason are unfortunately quite obviously not the strong points of those in power who are stupid, let alone that part of the population that hangs on the lips of the stupid.
Then I will explain further what Peter has instructed me to tell you. You should not and under any circumstances be misled regarding the really irresponsible and thoughtless statesman-like instructions of not wearing respirators, as well as not being too close in contact with persons foreign to you. The corona epidemic is by no means yet so under control with vaccines that would be really highly effective in the resurgence, with the epidemic becoming more prevalent in those areas that have so far been less affected.
We will take Peter's advice into account, even if it is not easy for us, sometimes, especially when visitors show up who do not wear masks, although we point out in the display case at the Beertop that masks are necessary.
People just don't think for themselves, as you keep saying. Consequently, they also don't take personal responsibility.
That is unfortunately the case, and it probably can't be changed. But something is happening. Wild animals are hunted down and killed without thought, and only rarely does anyone care. But if, for example, a domestic animal, and I'm talking specifically about dogs and cats, is run over by cars, taken by foxes or birds of prey, or if they disappear in some other way, such as simply running away, going feral, or somehow perishing in the world through some circumstances, then a huge fuss is made about it.
Unfortunately, the human beings don't see that the wild animals are shot during the hunt. Consequently, they don't care about it, just as they don't care when they eat the meat of wild animals, because for them it is only food whose origin they don't know and which they also don't investigate. The same goes for meat of any kind, which human beings do not bother to find out where it comes from, how the animals have been kept and killed.
Yes, often despite animal welfare laws, they are treated miserably, tortured and abused before being beaten to death or otherwise brutally killed. Often they die of thirst, are trampled to death by their own kind because they are crammed together in such a way that they can hardly move.
Yes, we have seen that many times, also during transports where no consideration is given to them at all.
Yes, and the animal transporters are so hardened that it doesn't affect them at all, that animals die miserably in the process. But the human beings among themselves are already so depraved that they get a kick out of seeing someone die, for example, in an accident on the road. It often happens that many rubberneckers immediately gather when a car crash or some other accident and so on happens, but these rubberneckers usually do not provide emergency aid but watch callously as others die miserably. And if I continue to let my thoughts run, then I come back to the fact that a great deal is done meanly. For example, that evil is deliberately done, such as deliberately doing everything to make someone strike in order to then appear to be the savior, as is often done in war and acts of terrorism, in order to appear better than the enemy, who can then be blamed for everything bad. Just as is happening now in Ukraine, where crimes are being committed against one's own people and blamed on the enemy.
But now, unfortunately, I must go because I have already exceeded my time. Farewell, but I will be back very soon.
All right then. Take care and see you soon.